Good morning to those listening, and welcome to the Design Leaders podcast. Every day I speak with candidates looking to grow in the world of design, development, and construction. I also speak with market leaders at the peak of their career who regularly speak about mentorship and helping the next crop of leaders in their development. How can we help professionals reach their goals in a small but ever-growing industry? Each episode, I want to provide a great opportunity for professionals of all levels to learn from market and thought leaders about avenues for development, areas of focus, how to speak about their project experience, and over time, help guide other professionals in their longer term goals and motivations. Today, I'm here with Adana Johns, S&T practice leader of Perkins and Will in Chicago. Adana spent 11 years with AECOM working across S&T projects alongside government, civic, industrial and commercial projects too. She then spent a year as a managing architect before moving to Perkins and Will as a PM. And over the last 8 years, Adana has developed and grown into the S&T practice leader and principal of the Perkins and Will Chicago office. Adana, I really appreciate you coming on this episode and welcome.
Thank you, Jackie. It's wonderful to be here. It was an honor to be invited, and I look forward to sharing some insight.
Awesome. It's great to hear. Well, Adana, I always start these off the same. So first question, firstly, how and why did you get into architecture and design in the first place?
So, don't you love these questions? I think the story is so original for everybody. Mine, I grew up in a very design-minded household. So for me, architecture made a lot of sense. And, as in the world of art and design, originally I was looking at graphic design, fine arts even, and really found myself gravitating towards architecture. I actually enjoyed calculus. I maybe was one of the few that enjoyed the math in high school. And so, putting math and art together, architecture was really a career path that made perfect sense to me. There was a drafting class offered in high school, which I took all by hand. And it really started to get my mind going around what this profession is. So that's really where I started. And I applied and attended the University of Illinois. I ran a Champaign, got my degree, fantastic experience. I was able to study abroad in France, which as an architecture enthusiast and all-around idea of space and curiosity, it was just really fantastic to spend a year pretty much in a history book and really paying attention to how really great architecture blends with the lifestyle. And the rest is history. Graduated, got my first job, and really never looked back. And I'm in Chicago. I'm very proud to be in Chicago. Like most Chicagoans, thought I would leave the city, go somewhere warmer, because we spend a lot of time lamenting about the cold winters in Chicago, but it's such a wonderful architecture city, great community of people who love architecture and great buildings all around us, similar to my affinity with Paris. So, here I am.
Interesting. Two, very different, beautiful cities when it comes to architecture, Chicago and Paris. And then Adana, moving into kind of your growth and your development throughout your career, we know that you've kind of worked across a number of different project styles and typologies, but there seems to be a focus in S&T. How have you felt about spending such a large chunk of your career focusing on S&T projects?
I will say my first project right out of school was a laboratory, and I joined AECOM. It was a firm that had a really strong technical focus. I felt that was the right decision for me because I wanted to be really confident in my technical abilities, balancing my design-minded household, right? So that was really important to me. And as I started working on these laboratory projects, I found there's such a strong message around what's happening within the space. The users that you interface are doing really fantastic research and development that really progress our society. So there's a stronger mission around the space that we're designing. And that really stuck with me. Now, I haven't only worked on science projects. I think as a part of the architectural profession and growth, having some variety is important. But I actually found when I came back fully to science here at Perkins and Will for the last 8 years that there's so much variety in the clients and the work that we do in the science and technology practice, that it really, it's never the same. It's always changing. Research is always changing. Clients are always changing the way you deliver projects. So it quenches that thirst to not stay still. So
Interesting.
don't regret it, and I'll be here for a long time.
Awesome. And then looking back to those early days with AECOM, how do you think in the early years of your career, your leadership would have described you?
That's a good, I'd say, motivated, hardworking. There was a lot of curiosity. I was very reliable, and that's something it was very important to me. I was growing in my profession and understanding how architecture works. I was put in a project architect position at the age of 26. So I was always really trying to move forward and push the boundaries of what I can accomplish. And I think that served me well. I was provided a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great mentorship by being there and being present.
Awesome. And then fast forwarding a number of years, it's always difficult to kind of self-reflect, but if you can, how do you think your colleagues, your peers, and your employees would describe you now as a leader?
How I hope they describe me is an advocate for their careers, for the firm as a larger entity. There's a lot of passion around growing the science practice, but I know that as a part of this practice, I'm one of many, and we all are stronger together. I work with a lot of really talented people, and so with that, to keep answering your question, I'd say I approach new situations with a level of confidence, but also I try to come with humility as well, because there's always something to learn, regardless of where you are at in your career, and being open to always learning. So and reliable, it's still there.
Well, I think, I often ask that question, and it is a difficult, it's difficult to self-reflect and answer there. And often people do talk about, what they hope their peers would describe them as. But I think, you blended their confidence and humility. At LHI, we have an idea of we, not me. I asked you about yourself, and you spoke about, being better together as a group. So I think that idea of we, not me, is really interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a time when you feel like specifically you became a leader, or did it happen over time? And when did you realize that you were a leader in this space?
It certainly was over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an interesting question, because, we're all leaders in certain capacities in our life right now.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that's listening to this podcast is a leader in some form. We play so many different roles in our life. So I think there is an interesting blend where I'm the oldest sibling. So a little bit of a sort of born into that, family dynamic leadership role. But as I grew in my profession, there's a point where you start to feel your feet underneath you, and you do know the answers. And actually, you enjoy sharing your insights and answers and being a part of that conversation. And so there's a little bit of a pivot there. When I joined Perkins and Will, actually, in fact, when, at the end of my career at AECOM, I was leading several projects in that technical forum and leading the team through challenging budgeting exercises. I was a leader, and I was looking for more, and joined a firm and was interested to lead various practices and really lead that front end of projects on the business side, to understand how all of that side of architecture truly works. So putting together what the project is, how the teams will be formed to execute the work, But then coming to Perkins will really give me an opportunity to test my own authentic leadership ability. It's a great place to do that, very entrepreneurial. When I joined and was promoted to practice leader, uh, instead of being told how to do it, I was asked how I was going to do it.
Mhm.
And so I had to take ownership and lead, even when leading sometimes felt uncomfortable.
Interesting. That kind of uncomfortable descriptive word is something that I hear often when asking that question, is the idea of kind of putting yourself in uncomfortable positions to grow and learn and develop.
Always.
So I think that's a brilliant idea there. In the same vein, what's something that you learned from a leader throughout your career that you've taken on board and stays with you to this day?
So many. Oh man, I could go, let's see, where do I start? Can I give you a couple of examples?
You can have as many as you want.
All right. Okay. Um, I I'm gonna call out actually a couple people from my past. Um, so at AECOM, I worked with a lot of fantastic architects, but there was one point that really struck me, and it was when I was learning project architecture and a little bit of project management. At that on that project I'd cited earlier, there was a coworker and a mentor. His name is John Kachukas, one of my first true mentors in the management realm, and I learned so much around how he spoke to clients and how he managed situations, the way that he would bring me in to resolve any challenges, talk about schedule, project direction. It sits so well with me to this day. It was really a big part of how I learned how to lead projects, and he ended up taking a role where he was responsible for joining projects that had some challenges, and he was brought on board to help sort of diffuse some of the challenges. And I could not, for the life of me, understand why you would do that. Why would you voluntarily be in a position where you're constantly working through challenges? And it makes so much sense to me that that's such a big part of what we do every day.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. So John's wonderful. I need to call him actually.
Mhm.
And I got to Perkins and Will, and there's just a tremendous amount of mentorship that happens in this firm, and some of it is there for you to absorb. A lot of it is for you to actually seek out. I was fortunate enough to join the firm, and I worked with Bridget Lesniak for all of those 8 years, and she is and will always be one of the true advocates for my career, and just look up to the way that she has navigated her career. She's done so much. And I'd say one of the big pieces of advice that she's said, even maybe if it's somewhat informally, just the way she acts is is an element of taking care of yourself throughout your career. I do, opportunities are exciting. You want to say yes, you want to be involved. And, just this balance of let's talk through what's on your immediate plate, where you want to go with it. Let's find resources, and just really helping me grow with that sort of confidence in the work that I'm doing. And she's just, I don't know, she's just fun to be around. Uh, she's got a lot to share, and you just have to listen.
I think that's crucial, that that notion there, fun to be around. When asking this question, I haven't heard that response there, but we spend at least 8 hours a day at work, if not, and the rest. So having a
Isn't that the
good
truth?
time and having a
Yeah.
good time and it being fun is crucial. When we share this, hopefully John and Bridget both see how positively you've spoken about them there. But Adana, moving on from your development and your growth and more focused in a design discussion now, hypothetically, if you could design or build absolutely anything, money is not an issue, what would you be designing and what would you be building?
Am I actually building it?
No, you're designing it.
Oh, okay. Because I probably could have just taken me a while, right? I would have to bring my husband in, he can build. Uh, so a dream project of mine, and it would be it's a smaller project, but it would be personal as, um, may or may not be with Perkins and well, but would be a winery. It's like, a lot around process, to actually make the wine from grapes. And so applying everything I know about process implementation and putting that forward from the science realm into a space that evokes such emotion, usually in some beautiful countryside. And I love and dearly appreciate wine. So maybe it takes me back to France. We'll see. I don't know.
Interesting. Follow on question and definitely off topic.
Mhm.
You're out on a Saturday night and you're ordering a glass of wine. What's your go-to?
Oh, being out on a Saturday night's actually not as common as it used to be with my 2-year-old. So some of those are more at home, but certainly a light to medium bodied French, um, either it's a French Pinot or sometimes uh, Burgundy. But I typically do love the French wine. Now we've been drinking more. There's some really great South African wines,
Mm.
uh, some from South Africa, uh, that are really fantastic. And but in the summertime, I tend to love the light to medium. I tend to stay away from the heavier bodied unless I'm enjoying a steak.
I understand that. I think as we come into summer, we'll start to see more rosés and white wines than
Hmm.
perhaps the full-bodied wine. My dad always told me if you're ever confused, just order the Malbec, and
Really?
that's
There's
what I've
actually some
lived by.
great French Malbecs out there too. And I will say, California has phenomenal wine. I think we all know that. But we tend to go towards the Oregon wines when we're at the grocery store if we're just picking up some easy wine. There's a
Interesting.
really great earthiness and a little bit more of a complexity to those wines that we do appreciate.
Awesome. Well, we do digress. I think it's important that we do digress so we can talk about other things outside perhaps of just architecture, but bringing it back to kind of more of that design focus.
Hmm.
Throughout your career, there's many of these projects, I'm sure, but if you can pick one, what's that you are able to discuss, because I'm sure much of it might be bound by
Hmm.
confidentiality agreements, but what's your favorite project that you've been a part of throughout your career, and what was your role on that project?
Uh, that that question, that's a really complex question because there's so much involvement in projects. I do have one that really rises to the surface for me, and it was the project that opened in 2019. It's the University of Cincinnati Gardner Neuroscience Institute in Cincinnati. The reason why it really is my favorite project is it was it was my first project from start to finish here at Perkins and Will. So I was involved in the early prep and positioning to interview to win the project. There all the way through closeout. We were there for the celebration afterwards, and it meant a lot to me that we were working with that client to do something really special, to conceive a building for them that could house all of their research institutes around neuroscience and neurological disorders, uh, come up with a very timeless and flexible solution, and hearing a lot of voices along the way.
Mhm.
Also, we were brought on a commission to design this building too, and it truly is. It's actually behind me. Now I'm
Ah,
looking at myself. Yeah,
interesting.
that's me. That's the
Ah,
photography. That's me. Yeah. And it was just such a wonderful project. The building itself is amazing. The client is incredible. My opportunity. But I will say what really resonates the most is the team and all of the individuals from Perkins and Will and the extended team that I had the opportunity to get to know, not just work with. You really get to know everybody, and I have a tremendous amount of pride for everyone's professional talents to come together to deliver such an amazing project.
The one thing that seems to be a bit of a common theme here is your positive thoughts about the wider team and kind of the wider talent of Perkins and Will. So I think anybody who's listening should definitely listen to the way that you're speaking about the wider team and kind of the collaborative nature that you can clearly hear there. This next question, it can be project based, it doesn't need to be, but what is something that you're particularly proud of in your career that you don't necessarily get to talk a lot about?
I mean, it's almost as simple as my day to day. I feel I honestly feel very proud for what I've accomplished, for talking about growth. When I set out in my early career, there's a certain threshold that you hit that you are growing towards a goal. And that goal that I set for myself in my late teenage years, early 20s, I'm here. So I do believe that I feel very proud, and it feels fantastic. I'm very proud to work on these projects, work with these people. I am also proud that through my career, stayed true. I'm proud of what I've learned. I'm also very proud I am able to balance career, friendships, and now a young family. And there's a tremendous amount of pride there too.
Awesome. It's great to hear that, as I said, it doesn't need to be project based and you're proud of your own growth and development. And then you've also kind of spoke about something more personal as well, which I think is crucial. This might be more challenging because, a lot of the projects that you work on are typically, confidential, but what is something that your team is currently working on that you find particularly impressive and noteworthy and worthy to share?
Let's see. It's confidential. I do have one. Okay, so it is another project that we're wrapping up construction on, and it follows a lot of the same sentiments of the University of Cincinnati Health Neuroscience Institute I talked about. It's the Fermilab Integrated Engineering Research Center. So we are about complete. So working on isn't full throttle anymore. We're working with the client, the contractor, through some closeout so we can celebrate later this year. That project, if we think and pull it apart as to what the mission was, to design a roughly 80,000 square feet new build adjacent to the iconic Wilson Hall out in Batavia, Illinois. That size of building isn't a tremendously large building, but what we were set out to do is really create a physical manifestation for collaboration with Wilson Hall that objectifies the next 50 years of Fermilab. The site itself was complex, balancing between the reflecting pond and the accelerator ring. And then, just this idea of what's happening and how flexible this space could be. And we, as a team, we had a team of lab planning, which I led, also the just high design, had the opportunity to work with, fantastic design talent, Ralph Johnson and Tom Rosino. And then also our workplace and strategy, thinking about how the engineering, more electrical engineering, can work a little bit differently in this new building to make it highly flexible and collaborative and integrated. Right, that's one of the words in the title of the project. So it was an honor to work with Fermilab as a national laboratory itself. There are only 17 national laboratories in the country, and just the amount of work that they do to support initiatives put out by our country. It's really fantastic. And so it was just impressive how we all came together and put together a solution that now when we look at it, you walk the building, it feels so easy, actually, right? And that's really an impressive part of that project itself.
Adana,
Big
before working,
personality, but small, but just very simple.
interesting. Well, before working in this industry and focusing in design and MEP engineering, I would never have thought about these spaces and never have given them a second thought. And then now, a few years on, hearing the way you're talking about these complex facilities, it's far more interesting now. So, it definitely does sound like an interesting project.
Yeah.
Moving on now from your design experience and design preferences and more looking at your upcoming goals and motivations. Your original goals, you'd mentioned kind of you got previously about your goals and then now being proud of the place that you're in now. But originally, when you first started out in your career, what were your goals? Have you achieved those goals? And how have those goals changed over time?
Mm-hmm. Yep. When I set out, my goal was to be an architect,
Hmm.
right? You graduate from architecture school. I was very interested to get my license, obtain licensure, and function as an architect and learn from all of the work. And I have a lot of confidence there. It's interesting. A couple of years out of school, I tallied a lot of my colleagues who I graduated with, and what it taught me is there are so many different pathways after you graduate college with architecture that you can take. You can go into product sales, you can go on the owner's rep side, industrial design. You don't necessarily have to just go get your license and be an architect. I mean, then there's facets within architecture, right? Science and tech is just one facet of architecture. So I did that. I got my license. And what I didn't know, and I think what's really difficult to fully understand when you're graduating with a more technical degree is that it is just like any other industry. There's a business component to it. So that for me became very interesting after I've been working for about, gosh, excuse me, hold on one second. Let me drink water. So the idea of then moving into the business side of architecture, I found to be extremely compelling. About 10 years into my career, learning more about that, project management, and then moving into practice leadership is, really perhaps that second point of your comment. So I checked the box on architecture, and then moving into practice leadership. What does that really mean? It's this idea of being able to understand the market and discover new opportunities for projects, and then have the foresight to then put the groundwork down on what that project is. So reconciling the programmatic space types, early planning, construction cost budget, reconcile all of that. I find to be just completely fantastic, and it is where I sit and can complement all of my colleagues quite well. And I can just sit and really be a part of a team actively that's creating the designs for these beautiful buildings that do impact the way that we work and the way that just like all architects, Perkins does a great job. I think all of our mission as architects is to create beautiful space that has an impact and evokes some sort of emotion when you're in them.
Interesting. And then now having made it to that practice lead position,
Mm-hmm.
what's the upcoming goals for the next stage of your career?
I think it's to grow, Jakey. There is so much in this level of my career to explore, um, just to grow in this platform.
Mhm.
And maybe that image is less about trajectory up, what you're doing as you're younger in your career, but now, after I've been working for about 20 years now, I hit my 20-year anniversary, it's really to grow in more of a depth.
Interesting. Well, these are, it's always good to talk about the positives and having
Mm-hmm,
reached these goals and what the upcoming goals are. With a 20-year career, I'm assuming there may be some disappointments and challenges along the way, and I think that those are just as important to discuss as well. So, is
mm-hmm.
there a example or a point in your career where you faced a challenge or you faced a disappointment and then you were able to overcome?
I, uh, architecture's challenging. I'd say that there isn't a week that goes by that there aren't challenges to overcome. Uh, one comment there, and then I can answer a little bit more directly. You think about how we approach projects and what we're doing. We're literally designing a prototype for a client or a person. We're learning those people, and we're translating that into a unique solution that then gets constructed. And so that in itself is a challenge. There's change, there's communication, it's testing you in all of these life skills
Mhm.
on a daily basis. So it's challenging, it's also rewarding, right? So there's this feeling of accomplishment when you overcome something that is challenging. I'd say um, one of the more pivotal parts of my career was back in 2008 when the economy it was, we were in a recession, and uh, I was with a company at that point uh, within AECOM that decided to cease operation, and all of us were in a phased manner let go to find a new job, and that was a big deal for me. A couple of years out of school, um, and really going through some pretty strong emotions around that next step and what that felt like.
Mhm.
Um, it was difficult. I, interviewed, gave me a sense to understand what other opportunities were in the market, but I did end up staying with AECOM with a different company, and I to this day believe that was the right choice. But it
I
was
look,
tough. It was really tough.
mm. I can imagine, in and around that 2008 time period, it's not
Hmm.
altogether dissimilar from the COVID era that we've just come out of now. So I do think it's crucial
Yeah.
for junior professionals who may be finding a tough time with it or have faced some disappointment to hear what you've just said there and note that, you know, years on, and Dana is now, the practice lead of the S&T practice of the second largest architecture firm in the world. So facing disappointments and kind of hearing from someone like yourself facing similar disappointments, I think is very important for the wider design community. But that's a bit of an overview of your goals. Now, kind of moving into
Hmm.
the last area of the podcast is some advice for industry professionals. As a practice lead, you must look at a lot of resumes. I know you do because I send a lot of them your way. And I would like to know, what would you like to see from a top quality candidate?
I think immediately you can see it some in the resume, but a lot of it comes through in simple conversation when you have a
Mhm.
chance to actually meet the candidate. Is it's a passion around architecture, but it is also some of the soft skills around listening and communicating out. Uh, an example an example really is that there's a lot to talk about with your work. If you're being interviewed and you're asked a simple question around your work, how is your team composed? What role did you play? It's amazing when you ask that question once and that question is answered for the next project and the next project. So this idea of thoughtfulness in the way that you're communicating,
Mhm.
um, it actually shows a lot around how you are going to be day to day, and it goes back to our early conversation around talent and skill around the work that we do is paramount because it is a very strong technical profession. But we work the hours. It is a profession of hours, so you have to have fun. And so then, like, do you want to hang out with this person every day? There's some of that. But it's this commitment to communication,
Mhm.
um, and knowing your craft, even whatever level you may be.
Of course. And then we totally get that you can't see anything or everything in the resume, and it's important to have that conversation and kind of get that interview so you can properly understand the background and the motivations of the candidate. Besides that point you've raised there about communication, what's some mistakes that you see from candidates in interviews, whether it's talking about the project experience, talking about previous employers? What's a couple of mistakes that you've seen in interviews that candidates should probably bear in mind?
I'd say I this is a tough one, but it is a real one. Is confidence,
Mhm.
um, and it's an idea of being confident in who you are today. Right? When we're interviewing, we understand your level of experience. We understand, the basics around the work that you do, um, and so I we have seen it where we're talking through the work, and there's just a level of downplay and a lack of either confidence or passion, and perhaps that's nerves, and that's completely understandable. But I would just encourage everyone to take a step back and feel good about what you've done and bring that confidence forward.
Awesome. It's something when I do interview prep work is something I often talk about is kind of have an idea and maybe go through a mock interview on
Hmm.
screen without anyone actually speaking to you, so you can see what you look like in responding to some of these questions. And I couldn't agree more. Bringing confidence to the table is paramount. And then in your sector, Adana, specifically of S&T, there's many changes every year, kind of, updates and kind of, new generation technology, et cetera, et cetera. So I can imagine there are changes to all sectors, but particularly your sector of S&T. How do you think the industry is going to be changing? Normally, I ask over the next 3 to 5 years, and then often people tend to answer 5 to 10 years, 10 to 20 years. So the time range you can choose, but how do you think the S&T industry is going to change over the coming years?
Uh, I think for us, uh, as a whole, not being Chicago centric,
Mhm.
I do believe we will see the trend continuing where clients are asking us to design these laboratories that are so flexible for various researcher and PI needs, rather than being so customly designed for one particular process we need.
Mhm.
And that's just so that the real estate can flex with the changing requirements. When I started my career, we were meeting with every single stakeholder and designing every single bench layout, knee space, sink configuration, and that has changed dramatically. So we are being asked as professionals to lean on the projects that we've done, our benchmarking, and bring that forward as a baseline. And that's not going to stop. That's going to continue. And I believe that's a benefit for everyone, to be able to use space in a different way.
Interesting.
And you can't go without answering that question and talking about artificial intelligence as well,
Hmm.
and what that can do as far as organizing data, uh, and moving that needle as well. And that will allow us, in my very optimistic view, will allow us to do more of the human factor of our work, meeting together, talking through the design, iterating, uh, that work that is just intrinsically a big part of the architectural profession. That's not going to go.
Well, I think AI is something we talk about a lot on the podcast and external as well, and there seems to be a growing concern of AI taking jobs from us. And one thing that I can tell you that it's not very good at is coming up with LinkedIn content. It's not particularly great at that. But interesting there. Kind of as we come to the end here, Adana, there are a couple of things I want to ask you for those who might still be listening here. Obviously, as the practice lead of that Chicago office in Perkins and Will, is there anything in particular for those still listening that you want to tell about Perkins and Will, about the S&T practice, maybe just about your office, so that people can hear about the culture and the opportunity that might be there?
I do, and I'm going to first weave it into maybe one token to leave everybody with. Something I'd mentioned a little earlier on is, in your career and your growth, from the very start, don't be afraid to say yes. We hear a lot about boundaries and saying no and navigating that, and you need to, paramount. But at the same time, don't be afraid to say yes. Don't be afraid to expose yourself to new experiences and opportunities. Consider that a part of your professional growth. It's something I look back on for my career and feel very strongly that was a good decision for me, to really put me where I am today. Because you're really gathering, it's a lifetime of experiences and knowledge, and be open to that. And so that's really a great segue for this firm as Perkins and Will. It is a large firm, but surprisingly functions as a collection of smaller studios. We are, as leaders and as staff, anybody who joins the firm, you are charged with your own destiny. It's very entrepreneurial. You've got so much, I'd say, runway or room to grow your passions that are usually adjacent to architecture, as long as architecture. So we've got research labs, we've got white papers that are written. There's a lot more besides just the project work that Perkins and Will does offer. And I do believe that community really assists in your professional growth, as an architect, being around counterparts of all levels, sharing similar interests, and feeling like you have some autonomy and control over what your next steps are, is very empowering, and a big part of why I love Perkins and Will, and I'm very passionate around the firm. And I do believe that, as talent is looking at this firm or joining the firm, it's undeniable that you feel that when you're here.
And one thing that I do want to add to that, Dana, is, obviously that's one leader in the Chicago office, but having spoken with a number of different individuals from a number of different offices, that is a common theme that we've heard across Perkins and Will leadership. So, I mean, to be honest, when I've worked on Perkins and Will roles and opportunities, without a doubt, the demand is there from individuals, and the positivity is there from people who are actually your staff, and the stories of your current staff speak volumes. So I do just want to add there that might be your experience, but I think that's a common theme amongst other leadership within Perkins and Will as well.
It's wonderful to hear.
As we have come to the end, for those of you still listening, I will be sharing the Perkins and Will LinkedIn, the website, and Adana's LinkedIn as well when we share this episode. So I'd encourage all of those listening, junior professionals, intermediate and senior, to go ahead, connect with Adana, have a look at the profile on LinkedIn and the Perkins and Will profile online. And she's a great individual to be connected to and be in the network, whether you are focused in S&T or not. So Adana, I really appreciate you coming on this podcast. And for those still listening, I hope you found it valuable. But for you, Adana, I really appreciate it. Thank you and goodbye.